What's up, everybody? It's Jordan, and welcome to the Sports 2 Hine Show. Today, I'm joined by Braedan Guthrie, also known as Bengals NFL on Instagram. How you doing today, Braedan?
I'm doing great. No, we're coming off a big win against the Tennessee Titans. Big game coming up, so I'm excited to come on and talk about all of that.
Yeah, a lot to get into. Is going to be lots of Bengals talk. What they won against Tennessee. We're going to be talking about their game against Kansas City. Also, going to be talking about Cincinnati in the college football world. Kind of shocking. Their head coach Luke Fickell left Cincinnati to go to Wisconsin. We're going to be talking about the college football rankings and so much more. Let's go ahead and start talking about the Bengals. The Bengals upset the Titans 20-16 on Sunday. Brady, what was your kind of initial reactions and thoughts on this Bengals win against Tennessee?
So, yeah, I thought this was a really gritty win for the Bengals. Obviously, the Titans play extremely rough football. So, for the Bengals to be able to match that showed a lot of toughness. Obviously, holding Derrick Henry to 38 yards is extremely impressive, no matter how you frame it. And Joe Burrow had 32 yards, and that includes the kneel down. So I think that it puts into perspective how well this defense is performing, how well guys like DJ Reader, Logan Wilson, Jermaine Pratt have been performing. We kind of saw this last year in the playoffs, for Titans fans or even other NFL fans who weren't so on the Bengals. The excuse was he's coming off an injury. He's not 100%. Well, he wasn't coming off an injury this year, and the Bengals held him to less rushing yards. Obviously, he had that big screen play, which, don't get me wrong, was a very well-called play by the Titans. Certainly got the Bengals, but even on that screen, he showed poor ball security after a phenomenal play by Cameron Taylor-Britt, who I also thought had a really underrated day. So for the Bengals to go into Tennessee, the defense playing how they did, another game with not giving a touchdown the second half, I think shows people that, yeah, the Bengals are still a really great team. They had that 0-2 start, but it's the NFL. A lot of stuff happens. The Bengals have bounced back appropriately and are once again showing that they're still a legit playoff team, a playoff contender, and a team that should not be taken lightly.
And you mentioned Cam Taylor-Britt. He is somebody you really notice watching the games. The last couple of weeks, he has really picked it up. Every single game, he is getting better. That's what you love to see with a rookie. He is getting way, way better as each game goes by. But yeah, I can completely agree. And you look at this Bengals team allowing Derrick Henry just 2.2 rushing yards per carry. I mean, if you take away that 9-yard rush on their first drive, you probably would have averaged less than 2, which is crazy. We talk about King Henry this, King Henry that. We shut him down this game. We shut him down in the playoffs. The presence of DJ Reader is definitely felt on this Bengals team. When you look at when Reader was out and we played the Browns, when we got humiliated by them on Monday Night Football, I mean, we were giving up so many rushing yards. And then you look at, since he's came back, we've had one of the better rush defenses in the league. That's not a coincidence. DJ Reader is one of the best defense tackles in the league. He helps our run defense so much. I know he's somebody you're high on. He had a great game Sunday. Jermaine Pratt, I think he's having an even better year this year than he did last year. He's really helping himself to get a big contract, and with him being a free agent at the end of the season. But when you look at this Bengals game, like people outside of Cincinnati or even Bengal fans, I don't think people realize how big of a win this is. I'm not going to lie. Heading into this game, I did not think we were going to win. The Titans are a very good team. The last 8 games, heading into this game, the Titans were 7-1 their last 8 games. Their only loss was against the Kansas City Chiefs, in my opinion, the best team in the league right now, and it's not even close. It was a one-possession loss with Malik Willis as their quarterback. This is by far the Bengals' best win of the season, and it's not even close. You went into Tennessee, you shut down Derrick Henry, your offense got going somewhat. You beat a great team against the Titans without Jamar Chase and Joe Mixon. This was a very, very, very impressive win by Cincinnati. And if we can keep the momentum going, playing Kansas City this week, we could see a kind of a winning streak, kind of like we saw towards last season when we went on the magical run going to the Super Bowl.
Yeah, absolutely. And something that is kind of more of coincidence, but something I like to mention is Joe Burrow before the game was 2-0 against the Titans. And he's 2-0 against the Chiefs. Both of those 2 winnings coming into the playoff. They beat the Titans and then the Chiefs. And this year they play the Titans, who we won. Now we play against the Chiefs. Now, obviously, that doesn't mean we're going to win or anything, but history shows us with Joe Burrow, as the competition gets harder, the better the Bengals play.
And when you look at this game for Cincinnati playing Tennessee on Sunday, a couple people I was very impressed with. Obviously, I already kind of mentioned Jermaine Pratt. Samaje Perine. Last season, I was not a fan of Perine at all. Not even going to admit it. I wanted him cut in the offseason. It would have saved money. Would have made sense. He has played out of his mind this season. He has played so good. He had 21 total touches for 93 yards and a touchdown. He is very, very impressive this year. At times, he's even played better than Joe Mixon. But somebody on Sunday to me, who I thought played really, really good given his limited opportunities, and every single time he gets an opportunity, he always makes the most of it. Trevion Williams. I've always been high on him ever since we drafted him. 3 touches on Sunday, 42 yards in just 3 touches. A guy who has been mainly our 4th-string running back throughout this season. When he came in, the limited times he did, he played absolutely great for us. So when you're having these 3rd and 4th string guys for the Bengals, if they're playing good, odds are our 1st and 2nd string guys were good. And, that was the case on Sunday. Our defense was just phenomenal. Our offense was good at times, but we were without Joe Mixon and Jamar Chase. I definitely expect our offense to improve a lot this upcoming week, but very, very impressive win for the Bengals, getting the win against Tennessee on Sunday. But before we kind of talk about, the Bengals, highly anticipated matchup against the Chiefs, this upcoming Sunday in Cincinnati, when you're looking at this AFC North right now, it's a lot more interesting than I kind of thought it'd be. When you look at the Bengals, like I said, I did not think they were going to win this game against the Titans. And then you look at the Ravens, who lost to the Jacksonville Jaguars. It was freaking awesome. I think now people are starting to realize that the Ravens were the most overrated team last season, and they're 100%, not even close, the most overrated team in the NFL right now. When are people going to start realizing that the Baltimore Ravens are getting bailed out by their freaking kicker? This is a Ravens team who people talked about Super Bowl expectations and all this, that, and the other. They're going to win a division. They're going to go to the Super Bowl. They're going to win playoff games. This Ravens team, they are just so overrated. You look at all their games. How many different times this season has the Baltimore Ravens blown at least a 9-point lead? They blew multiple leads. If you can't trust them having a 17-point lead to begin the season and a 9-point lead against the Jacksonville Jaguars, how are you going to expect this team to play go in the playoffs and win a playoff game? If you're the Baltimore Ravens now, you do not trust them at all. Lamar Jackson has been wildly inconsistent. Justin Tucker is not able to bail out Jackson and the Ravens once again, and that's when they lose. But I'm starting to feel a little bit more comfortable for the Bengals to possibly win a division. If we win Sunday against the Chiefs, I think we will win a division, because it's one of the situations where you expect the Ravens to win on Sunday and you expect the Bengals to lose on Sunday. So that would be another game up for Baltimore. But if there's a situation where we're playing the final week of the season in Cincinnati, whoever wins that game gets the AFC North, I think the Bengals will take full opportunity of that and win a division. But as of right now, it's getting way closer than I thought it would. But if the Bengals win Sunday against the Chiefs, I think it's our division to lose.
Oh, excuse me, completely agree. And something that was kind of interesting, as you brought up, the Ravens keep blowing leads, and you would think, since the Ravens are a run-first team, this is what the Ravens should be getting success out of, because the last thing you want is trying to play comeback from behind with the Ravens, where they can run the ball, kill that clock. That's Lamar Jackson's strength. But yet they are still blowing these leads. As you said, Lamar's been wildly inconsistent. And when your quarterback's inconsistent, that's the trouble in these races. Joe Burrow, he is consistent. When he goes in the game, he's going to make those throws, whether if it's reading the field or pocket appearance. You know what you're getting out of. You're getting pretty damn good stuff. With Lamar, one game he may be throwing perfectly. And even the first time we met them, we kind of brought this up, but he missed so many throws. And it kind of, I don't want to say kept the Bengals in it, because it was always going to be a close game, but there were so many missed opportunities for him. And like you said, he got bailed out by Justin Tucker. That game went down to the wire in Baltimore on primetime. So the Bengals beating the Titans, If they beat the Chiefs, they're going to have all the momentum in the world. In that final week, I do not believe we're going to get swept by Baltimore. I think we will beat them, even if we lose to the Chiefs. And if we lose to the Chiefs, that'll suck, but that's a fair game to lose. They, like you said, they're the best team in the NFL right now, and I completely agree with that. And as of now, Bengals and Ravens are tied 7-4, of course, being as of now, Ravens having the tiebreaker, but we are far from the season being over. And the Bengals having the same record, heck, if they had the same record going into the week 18 and the Bengals beat them, now we're suddenly in first place. So, like you said, it is becoming extremely interesting. I don't think anybody expected the Ravens to blow a lead, let alone lose against the Jaguars. And, we're starting to see Lamar's being a bit more exposed. Teams are adjusting more and more by the year of how to counter his play style. It's at the point, like we kind of mentioned, when they have these big leads, that should play into their favor as being a run-heavy team, but yet teams who are not that great, no disrespect to the Jaguars at all, but they're not that good of a team. So when you're blowing leads to teams like that, when you have the weapons where you should be blowing them out and you're losing, that shows that the Ravens are certainly not this unbeatable team. And I think while we may have the tougher schedule down the stretch, I think because of, like you said, that consistency, the grittiness, I think the Bengals do pull it out. Obviously, it's going to go down to the wire, but I think with how these past few weeks have progressed, the Bengals are the better team.
Yeah, right now, it's one of the situations where a month ago, I would still say the Bengals are the better team. I've not been sold on Baltimore at all. I think from the beginning of the season to right now, they have still been the most overrated team in the league. And you look at how many times, Justin Tucker has bailed this Baltimore Ravens team out. This should not be happening for a team who, just a week or two ago was mentioned as possible Super Bowl contenders and all that. The first month of the season, the Ravens are one of the best teams in the league. Jackson's the MVP candidate. When you go and look at some of these games, Tucker bailed the Ravens out by getting a game-winning field goal against us. When you look at the games against the Cleveland Browns, it was 23-20. Without Justin Tucker's field goals, they don't win that game. Without the 2 field goals by Tucker against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, they don't win that game. And people are starting to realize that, this team is just extremely overrated. I hope that we play them week 18 when it comes down that it's a tie heading into that week, and then we get the win against them and win a division. If we don't win a division, I know this is going to sound crazy. If we do not win a division, I hope we have a lower seed as a wild card to hopefully play the Ravens. I want to play the Ravens so freaking bad in the playoffs. I don't care if it's in Baltimore, because that's a guaranteed win. This Ravens team is overrated. They are not as good as people think, but when it comes to playoff time, holy crap, times that by about 10. This Ravens team is not made for the playoffs. They're not, like you said, they're starting to get exposed. A team that was so reliable and consistent. If they're up 10 points, it's over. Like, it could be in the first quarter. The Ravens are up 10 points. There's no way they're going to blow a lead. How many different times this season they've already blown? I think there's been 5 different games this season where they've blown a lead by 4 or 5 games that they've blown a lead by 9 points. That's absolutely unheard of. I believe the first week last season they blew a 10-point lead against the Raiders. But before that game, they only blew one 10-point lead under Jackson heading into that game. Like, it's crazy. Like, that was their strength, has now kind of turned into a weakness for them. Which some people would not think for this type of Baltimore Ravens offense. But when you look at this Ravens team right now, the only team on the remaining schedule that's over 500 that they play for the rest of the season is us. And depending how it goes, there's a chance Jackson and some of their starters might not play because they could possibly have that AFC North already clinched by then. But they played the Broncos. They played at Pittsburgh, at Cleveland, the Falcons, Pittsburgh again, and at Cincinnati. And then let's look at the Bengals here. You look at it, there's 2 teams that we play that are not over 500, but those teams are good. We play at Tampa Bay, who were 500 on Sunday, but lost to Cleveland. And that other game is against Cleveland, a team we've lost 5 straight games against. We play Kansas City, Cleveland, at Tampa Bay, at New England, Buffalo, and the Ravens. The Ravens are currently first place in the AFC North right now, but of all those games, to me, I feel most comfortable when the Ravens winning that game. Because, yes, the Patriots are not great, But you never know the weather in New England around Christmas time. It could be snowing, and this Bengals team is not used to really playing in cold weather and snowy weather and stuff like that. The Chiefs, we beat them twice last year. We can beat them again the way we're playing, but it should be a close one. The Browns, hopefully, we end our losing streak against them. But I mean, you don't know. This is a situation where I just did not think we would already be kind of not really switching the narrative, but already talking about the Bengals might win the division now because they got a huge upset victory against Tennessee, and the Baltimore Ravens get a upset loss against Jacksonville on Sunday.
Yeah, I think a big thing with Lamar Jackson is he, at the end of the day, he doesn't get it done. Since I saw this statistic on Twitter the other day, but since the Ravens Super Bowl win, they've won like 2 or 3 playoff games since, and that Super Bowl being in the 2012. So, yeah, Bengals for many, many years were being made fun of for not winning a playoff game, and that's fair. I won't lie, but the Ravens have not been able to find success in the playoffs. When it comes down to the wire, Lamar Jackson's not able to perform and get them those key victories. So I completely agree, especially if the AFC North's on the line and Lamar has to step up. As talented he may be, there's no evidence to suggest he's going to step up and win the game for them. If anything, the data shows that he's going to choke it away. Now, I don't want to say that's definitely going to happen, but we've seen tendencies where as the bigger the game gets, the lower his performance is.
There's going to be a time, now this might be a crazy take, but there's going to be a time when people are going to realize Lamar Jackson is nothing more than a glorified Andy Dalton with elite running. Like, when it comes to prime time, they're exactly the same. Like, if you're a Ravens fan, you should trust a taco fort before you trust Lamar Jackson in the playoffs. Like, it is absolutely crazy how bad Jackson in the playoffs. Tim Tebow has a higher quarterback rating in the playoffs than Lamar Jackson. But,
sorry.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, the last time I was on the show, we actually talked about the Lamar Jackson and Andy Dalton comparison, and obviously play style, they're very different, but when you look at the big games, when they need to step up, that's when they play their worst.
And when it comes down to it, when it comes to the, bright lights under pressure, that's when Jackson and the Ravens, fold under pressure, which is good for the Bengals because, the Ravens have lots of pressure right now because, they have to, start winning games because the Bengals are red hot right now. So hopefully they can kind of screw up and, fold under pressure like they have in the past, and the Bengals can reclaim the AFC North for the second consecutive year. But it should be interesting with the AFC North. With the Bengals, they have a hard schedule. The Ravens have the easiest schedule to close out any team in the NFL. But looking at this here, when you look at the Bengals, they play the Chiefs on Sunday. Obviously, up to this point, arguably the most highly anticipated matchup for the Bengals this season. Like we both kind of said, the Chiefs are by far the best team in the league right now. I don't think it's close, but the way the Bengals are playing, I think this could be a very good game. What are your kind of thoughts and, analysis for this game between the Bengals and the Chiefs on Sunday?
Yeah, so it's crazy how good the Chiefs still are. They lose Tyreek Hill, and it's like they got better in doing so, and Tyreek Hill is obviously a phenomenal player. So, of course, you have the obvious, Patrick Mahomes, contain him, blah, blah, blah. That's not quite how it works. So what you do is the Bengals were able to beat him twice last year, both in big games, one to go to the Super Bowl, one to clinch the AFC North. So you got to get creative with your defense. You have to show blitz and then drop into coverage. You have to do as much as you can to defend him. And in certain scenarios, you might not have to be consistent with the type of defense you're playing because with Mahomes' play style, he breaks his sack, he's scrambling. Suddenly there's 3 guys he can throw to. So you have to confuse Patrick Mahomes, make him second-guess himself. And then doing that also gives the defensive line enough time to pressure him, and that could break down the play. So I think defensively, Lou Anarumo is going to have a very challenging day. But he's shown he can adjust to Patrick Mahomes' abilities. He can adjust to that offense. And even though Tyreek Hill's gone, I think we've seen it's a similar style offense. And with that, I think the Bengals can contain him. They can confuse him. And with this Bengals offense, with Jamar Chase coming back, Joe Mixon, who will probably come back, this offense can keep up right with them, even if the defense struggles. Like, obviously, the past 2 games, they got off to pretty slow starts, but when it mattered, they stepped up and they made plays. So it's going to be really interesting to watch. And I think the Bengals certainly cannot have those slow starts in offense, because I think for them to get away with that 3 straight times is a bit much. You already know that Chiefs team remembers those 2 games very well, and I'm sure the coaching staff is humming down on that. They're picking at every little detail of what went wrong, and this is a big game for the Chiefs too, because this is a big AFC matchup. Obviously, far away to tell, but this could be a potential 2 second straight year AFC North, AFC Championship match. So these are 2 Super Bowl contenders playing in Cincinnati with 2 coaches who have really improved. We're going to see a really fun day between Andy Reid and Lou Anarumo. It's going to be about adjustments by the drive, by the quarter, by the half, and whoever I think makes more adjustments wins this game.
Heading into the season, I thought the Chiefs were going to win this game because they have revenge on their mind. 2 straight games last year we beat them, and just they blew a huge lead in both of those games. We ended up coming back and we win both of them. And when you look at this, if I'm the Bengals, I feel somewhat confident that where they're playing, and now we get Mixon and Chase back, I would feel much more confident that Chidobe Awuzie was playing. I feel like this is a type of game I mentioned earlier. Cam Taylor-Britt has played very, very good recently, but do not be surprised if Patrick Mahomes throws the ball a lot towards his way, kind of exposing a young rookie who has played good, but he doesn't have a lot of experience like Chidobe Awuzie does. This is a game that like I said, Taylor-Britt's getting better each game, but this is a game where I think maybe, he might slip up some because I think he's going to get, the ball thrown towards him a lot. When you look at the Bengals right now, the offense has been good at times, but it's just so inconsistent. There might be one drive where everything is going. Burrow might be like 6-6, 50 passing yards, and Mixon might get 30 rushing yards, something like that. Then there's other kind of spurts. There might be a couple of 3-and-outs. We just look so stagnant. We have to be consistent. And this was even kind of something last year. The Bengals, when it comes to playing elite teams, or really most teams in general, we are so inconsistent at playing a full good game. We've played, good at times. We played a good full game, really, against the Saints, but the Saints aren't great. The same thing against the Falcons. You could say the Panthers, but we don't really, Burrow barely even played the second half. Like, when you see a game that the Bengals are playing a true championship contender start to finish, even if they lose, like let's say they lose by 3 points, but if it's start to finish, we play great, and it was a back and forth game, and either team could have won. It's one of those situations where, the Bengals lost. They lost to the best team in the league, but they played really good and were not far as bad to the Chiefs as maybe some would think, type of deal. But it's very interesting. This could go either way. I'm excited about it. But with this defense, it's getting better. I know when you look at the Pittsburgh game, we give up 30 points against Pittsburgh. That was their first time the whole season they scored more than 20 points in offense. But when you look at the Bengals, their rush defense is getting so much better. I mentioned with Reader. I feel like this is like with our secondary, I feel like I'm not going to say it's going to get exposed, but expect Mahomes to just maybe get like 300 at least passing yards, because with Awuzie out. You look at those first 2 games we played last year. Awuzie played great those games. And then now we don't really have the experience of corner and secondary like we did compared to last season, but it should be a very, very interesting game that can go either way.
Yeah, I completely agree what you're saying about Cameron Taylor-Britt. Like, he has really popped off these past few games, but he hasn't necessarily popped off with his coverage. He's shown that he's a physical corner, and we love every bit of that. But we haven't seen him much in coverage. And there's a few times where he did give up catches, but every corner does that. But he hasn't really truly been tested. And this week, he is certainly going to be tested. There's going to be interesting to see how he performs. I'm expecting struggles, and I think, like I said, I think he will struggle. I hope social media doesn't overreact, but it is social media, so they will. But this is the type of game that I think he needs to play. He needs this for his development, because in the NFL, you want to be the best. Well, they're playing the best. So this is going to be a big game for Cameron Taylor-Britt, regardless if he plays extremely well or really struggles. This is going to be kind of a stepping stone in his development.
So right now it's Tuesday. The game's on Sunday at 4:25. I'm sure my score prediction will probably change at least 2 or 3 times by the time they actually play. But as of right now, what would you say your score prediction would be for the Bengals and Chiefs?
This pains me to say, but I'm going to go 31-28 Chiefs. I think the Bengals are absolutely going to keep it close. At the end of the day, I think the Chiefs are more talented. They have better coaching. And like I said, the Bengals are going to keep it close. But after losing 2 straight times to the Bengals, I just don't believe they're going to lose a third straight time. They're much better than the Titans.
I was going to say 31-28 too, so I'll change. I'll say 31-27. McPherson will get 2 field goals, and that's something else. When you look at, with Clark Harris, since he's been out, like McPherson, to me, I don't think he's been himself. With Clark Harris, since he's been out, McPherson has not been as good. That's something else. Maybe McPherson, last season we seen him get so many game-winning field goals for us that it comes down to a situation like that, maybe he might miss or something. We've seen him miss kind of a couple of cheap shots for McPherson so far this season since Clark Harris has been injured. But I feel if the Bengals win this game, I feel extremely confident we're going to win the division. Because, after that following game, after the Chiefs, we play the Browns. The Browns, we've lost 5 straight. But if we can beat the Chiefs, we can beat the Browns. It's one of the and we play a couple other good teams, but this is kind of a resemblance of last season. When you look at our streak kind of towards the end, we got red hot. We were the hottest team in the league. And this is just kind of how it was last year. And this roster right now is better than the roster last season. So hopefully we kind of have a similar situation this year compared to last year.
Yeah, absolutely. And kind of like, obviously this isn't the theme of the episode, playing the Browns after this week. And we could talk about Deshaun Watson as much as we want, but at the end of the day, this upcoming week against the Texans is his first time playing in over, I think, 700 days. So, and we're going to be playing him in his second game back, and I think he's going to be 100% himself in his second game is ludicrous, and so I think when we do play them, he's going to be extremely rusty, and that's the type of stuff we can take advantage of, especially with how well Lou Anarumo has been coaching lately.
And it's one of those situations where you look at Deshaun Watson, the last snap he played to right now, there's been multiple quarterbacks that have jumped him in the quarterback rankings. People say Deshaun Watson's a top 10 quarterback. To me, that's stupid. I don't think you can even put him on a list, a guy who hasn't played in close to 2 years. When you look at the last time the Bengals faced Deshaun Watson, Brandon Allen beat Deshaun Watson. And it's one of those situations you would just not expect that at all. If Brandon Allen can beat Deshaun Watson, surely Joe Burrow can beat Deshaun Watson. He's going to be rusty, like you said. He's going to play like crap this week. I wouldn't be surprised if he plays like crap the rest of the season. This is a guy who's in a new system, a new offense, new weapons, hasn't played close to 2 years, and people just expect, the last time he played, he was a top 5, top 10 quarterback, that he's not going to drop any. That's a bunch of crap. Like, he's going to be rusty, and that's really benefits the Bengals. I sound crazy. If I'm the Bengals, since it's Watson's only his second game back, I would rather face Watson than Jacoby Brissett. I know I might sound crazy because Watson, there's no possible way he's going to be playing a level like he did before he got suspended and just his second game back for a guy who has not played nearly 2 years. Like, that's crazy to me.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm really glad you brought that Brandon Allen statistic back because it's just not like the Bengals beat Watson. Brandon Allen outdueled him. Now, obviously, the Texans roster that year was obviously not great, but at the end of the day, like, Bengals offense, Burrow's rookie year wasn't great, and obviously the record wasn't great, but you immediately saw Joe Burrow elevating that offense and being much better than it was with Andy Dalton, and Watson wasn't able to really help his offense out. And like I said, there are certain factors that go into that, but I think, and I agree, I would rather play Watson and I think kind of going off that is Watson's going to have a lot of pressure. I think every team he's going to play is those defenders are going to want to take him out. They are going to tackle him as hard as they can. And just like everybody around the league hates him, I'm sure there's Browns players in that locker room that don't appreciate him in his press conferences. It sounds like Jacoby Brissett isn't overly fond of him. So Watson's going to have all this pressure, people breathing down his neck. People are going to be waiting for every little mistake he may make. And I just don't see him being able to overcome all of that, especially his second game back.
And, the Texans have the worst record in the league right now. They played the Browns this Sunday. This is just so dumb that Deshaun Watson's first game back is against the Texans. But it's all about ratings. It gives us something to talk about. The NFL purposely did this to just give ratings and get people talking. He should have been suspended the whole entire season, but that's besides the point. This is the Texans Super Bowl against the Browns this week. A guy who so much talk last year. He was on the roster, but he didn't play. It gives a distraction from their locker room in the Texans last season, and really the whole time that situation happened up until he got traded to Cleveland. All they heard about was watching this, watching that while they're trying to play. A guy who's not even really on their active roster playing. But yeah, this is their Super Bowl this year. Don't be surprised if the Texans win this game. I think they're going to win this game. They're not a good team right now, but when all the revenge on their mind, playing against Watson, that should be a very interesting one with Houston and Cleveland. But when you look at, the NFL, it's going to be very, very interesting as we're getting close towards the, December. When you look at teams in the NFL, the teams who are most likely to go to Super Bowl are the teams who get hot in the middle of November or beginning of December. The Bengals are one. Hopefully, it kind of goes back to last year. They kind of got hot last year on this time. Kind of, looks like they might this year. Who knows? But when, kind of switching gears to Cincinnati, the Bearcats, not Cincinnati Bengals. Luke Fickell left the Cincinnati Bearcats to go to Wisconsin. Shocked a lot of people, very understandably so. But this is very interesting. I did not think Luke Fickell was going to leave Cincinnati. Everything that he did for Cincinnati, he put them on the map before he was at Cincinnati. Cincinnati was all right, but not nearly as a big time school as they are now. He has done so much more for Cincinnati than any coach possibly could have done. He's by far the best coach in program history. Nobody comes close. So there's lots of talks about who could possibly be the next head coach for the Cincinnati Bearcats. Some people will say Urban Meyer. That's not going to happen. That makes no sense. Yes, he graduated Cincinnati. That's really all you can say about that. Like, nothing more. You're going to have to pay Urban Meyer $10+ million, to be a head coach at Cincinnati. Like, let's be honest. Cincinnati's a great school, but more than likely, whoever gets this job, this is get a job, be real good, and then go to a bigger school like Luke Fickell did with Cincinnati, going to Wisconsin, one of the bigger, prestigious schools in the country, a stepping stone job, basically, have a couple good years and then leave for a bigger program. Somebody else is Deion Sanders. That intrigues me, I'm not going to lie, but that just doesn't make any sense. You're going to have to pay Deion Sanders a crap ton of money, probably $6-7 million at least. I mean, he's going to get a type of contract that Hugh Freeze has got, or a kind of a contract extension that Lane Kiffin got with Ole Miss. So those are not likely. Meyer will not happen. Sanders will not happen. This to me is clearly should be their favorite. You have to get him. This makes so much sense. Ohio State's passing game coordinator, wide receiver coach Brian Hartline. I know you won't like it because you're a Ohio State fan, but this just makes so much sense. When you look at Hartline, if he goes to Cincinnati, he is one of the best recruiters in the country. Luke Fickell was at Ohio State. He came to Cincinnati. Look what he did. I'm not going to say Hartline's going to replicate Luke Fickell's success at Cincinnati, but I think he's the closest person that you can get to do it. Hartline, to me, when it comes to him or a Deion Sanders, Hartline is a more it's a situation where it's a less risk, but it's a higher reward. With Deion, there's a much, much, much higher risk. Because even though you're a Power 5 school, you're now going to the Big 12, your expectation with Deion Sanders as your head coach is to win a national championship. That's very unlikely to happen. Brian Hartline, your expectation is to win the Big 12 and, get into the playoff as a Big 12 representative. That can happen, but I just don't know if they'll be able to win a championship or not. With Hartline, he's one of the best recruiters in the country. I mean, he helped Ohio State get Chris Olave, Marvin Harris Marvin Harrison Jr., Garrett Wilson, several other big-time wide receivers at Ohio State. He's one of the fastest rising, coaches in the league, in the country. He's going to be one of the top guys to get a top job in the country right now. I think Hartline makes a lot of sense. To me, if I'm Cincinnati, that's the guy you have to get. It just makes a lot of sense in my opinion. And when you look at Cincinnati and you look at some of these other, programs around the country, we've seen some of these other programs like Georgia Tech have already hired their head coach. And, you look at Colorado and some of these other, schools. Cincinnati was in the college football playoff as a group of 5. Like, that is insane. You would have never, ever, ever thought a group of 5 team would have been in the college football playoff with a 4-team format. Cincinnati is one of those teams to be in the playoffs. You can't say that about USC. I mean, yeah, they might be in the playoffs, in a couple of weeks, but USC, one of the most prestigious programs in college football history, has never been in the college football playoff. But Cincinnati, a group of 5 team, has. Cincinnati is a much more a big-time job than people think. And I think Brian Hartline should definitely, go after the Cincinnati job, and Cincinnati should go after Brian Hartline to become their the new head coach of the Cincinnati Bearcats.
Yeah, I completely agree. It breaks my heart to say, but I think Brian Hartline is the best option. For me and other Ohio State fans, we knew this was inevitable. He is phenomenal at coaching, especially that passing game coordinator. He performs well with the players. The players respect him. Like you said, that recruiting ability. I don't know how he does it, but he is, like you said, the best recruiter in the country. So when you factor all of those, I think he's a perfect fit for Cincy. And like you said, Deion Sanders, I think that's just not realistic. It's something to talk about on Twitter. That's a fun conversation, sure. But at the end of the day, I truly believe Sanders probably wouldn't want it. And Cincinnati, when they realistically look at it, and especially with the finances, they don't want it either. I think with the experience that Hartline has and the impact he could have on recruiting classes, I think he is certainly the best option for Cincinnati. And I think, like I said, I think both us Ohio State fans and the coaching staff knew that Hartline was too talented of a coach and as a recruiter to just stay as a passing game coordinator forever.
And it's one of those situations with Brian Hartline, like we said, one of the best recruiters in the country. Cincinnati and Columbus, not that far away from each other. Guys he helped recruit to Columbus or Ohio State may even, join him in Cincinnati. Guys who he currently is trying to commit to Ohio State. Maybe they don't go to Ohio State. Maybe they join him to Cincinnati. Like, there's not a far, travel distance between these two schools, and that's something else I think people need to consider. Some of these recruits, sensational recruits that Brian Hartline has been able to get, I guarantee you, multiple of these guys are going to, go to Cincinnati because, instead of maybe being the 6th receiver on Ohio State, that might be the 2nd or 3rd at Cincinnati. This is a program on the rise again. Some may say a rebuild, but the way Cincinnati is, I think they can contend in the Big 12 immediately, especially if you get Brian Hartline. That is the smartest choice. Like I said, I think it's the lowest risk, highest reward situation, team like how Florida got Billy Napier last season. It was under the radar signing. That was a low risk, but the reward is a very, very high. Hartline to Cincinnati makes so much sense. I think Cincinnati would be kind of ridiculous if it did not go after Brian Hartline.
Yep, completely agree, and we'll have to see what happens. It's always really difficult in this stage of college football. Obviously, the conference championship games are coming up, and a lot of the new head coaches leave to their new school, like Luke Fickell when he went to Wisconsin. Obviously, many UC fans angry, which is completely understandable, but that's also the realistic situation in college football. As soon as you commit to that job, you have to get your recruits, your coaching staff. So I think UC, they don't have a lot of time to wait around, and I do expect them to go for Brian Hartline. I don't follow too many UC accounts, but I did see multiple report that Hartline is on the top of their list or top 3 or whatever it may be. So when I look at all the details and what's realistic and what's not, I can't honestly believe that Hartline will be UC's head coach next year.
It should be very interesting in Cincinnati. That I kind of agree with what you're saying. If I had to bet on somebody, I think Hartline would be the next head coach of the Cincinnati Bearcats. And looking at this here, on Saturday, Ohio State took on Michigan. I have said before, I cannot stand Ohio State. I know you love Ohio State. Before the season started, I thought they were the best team in the country. Before that game ended, I still thought Ohio State was the best team in the country heading into that game. It was just very crazy. I feel like this Ohio State-Michigan matchup this past Saturday was a much just more shocking compared to last season. Because when I look at college football, the two best teams in the country throughout the whole entire season, not even a debate for me, was Georgia and Ohio State, and I had Ohio State number one the whole entire year. And then I hate the narrative about this game. Oh, Michigan killed Ohio State. Yes, they did beat them by 20 points, over 20 points, but 7 minutes left, Ohio State was down by 7 points. Let's not act like this was a blowout from start to finish. Like, this was a situation where, yes, Michigan won by a lot. Stats are deceiving. The last couple of touchdowns towards the end of the game made it look like Ohio State was getting blown out the whole entire game when this was a back-and-forth battle pretty much the entire game up until, like, the midway through the fourth quarter. But I was just so surprised that Michigan was able to beat Ohio State again. Like, this is absolutely insane. I know some people say that Ryan Day should be fired from Ohio State. That's ridiculous. He has a 90% win percentage. Yeah, you lost to Michigan back-to-back years. I mean, Harbaugh, how many times did he lose to Ohio State to start off with Michigan? I mean, that's crazy. Like, just because you lost your rival 2 straight times does not mean you should be fired. But it's very interesting, very shocking loss by Ohio State. What were your kind of thoughts and reactions with that game on Saturday?
So yeah, obviously the Ryan Day firing stuff is complete BS, complete media overreaction. And I guess my overreaction take would be he kind of reminds me of John Cooper, previous Ohio State coach, who he would dominate throughout the whole season. Then it came to Michigan. They just couldn't win. Now that's my overreaction. When I'm thinking logically, it's been 2 years. It's not a great look, but at the end of the day, Ohio State last year, they still won the Rose Bowl. Obviously, you'd like to get into the playoffs, but losing to Michigan doesn't define who this team truly is. And I think there's a possibility these teams even play again, which I know we're going to talk about later. But yeah, like you said, the stats are deceiving. Things really kind of fell apart a few different times. I think the biggest gut wrench was when Ryan Day decided to punt for it, when literally everybody, including CJ Stroud, was saying, no, let's stay on the field. And I think what was clear is Harbaugh was coaching to win. Day was coaching to not lose.
And that's something we as Bengal fans noticed was Marvin Lewis. He wasn't coaching to win. He just wasn't coaching to lose type of deal. He wasn't, coaching great, but he wasn't coaching to win. He just, like you're saying, not coaching to lose situation. And it's one of those games, you look back at Ohio State, there's certain games they beat their opponents by 20 or 30. But in those moments and in those games, there's been times of just very kind of questionable coaching calls by Ryan Day. And certainly there were several of those against Michigan on Saturday. So the college football playoff rankings were released just a couple of hours ago. And this is very interesting. So let's see here. 6 is Alabama, 5 Ohio State, 4 USC, 3 TCU, 2 Michigan, 1 Georgia. This is the first time I can honestly say 6-1. I think the committee finally got it right. It was about freaking time. You look at it, there is no logical explanation. There is no reason at all. There is no possible way Alabama should have been ahead of Ohio State. Ohio State should be at 5. That's 100% the right spot, in my opinion. Alabama, there's a couple of teams heading into the year and really throughout the whole season, I've said the most overrated teams in the league. A&M, we saw how that went. They're not even bowl eligible. Alabama and Tennessee. Alabama is very overrated. I think if Ohio State play Alabama, they beat them by at least 14 points. USC, this is interesting. They play in the Pac-12 championship. They play Utah. They've already lost to Utah this season. They lost to them by 1 point. TCU plays in the Big 12 championship. They play against Kansas State, who is currently ranked 10th. Michigan, they play 8-4 Purdue. Regardless, they're in. And Georgia plays a 3-loss LSU in the SEC championship game. Regardless of Michigan and Georgia win or lose, they're both in pretty much no matter what. TCU, to me, I think if TCU loses, obviously they're going to be out. I think TCU is the worst, could possibly be the worst college football team ever to make the college football playoff. And this is a situation we're looking at TCU, like They're winning, but barely. They just do not look great compared to these other teams. When you look at TCU and USC, there's a chance both these teams could lose, and it's going to Ohio State would get in and Alabama would get in. And it's so crazy to me. We're talking about a 2-loss team in the college football playoff. That should never, ever happen. But people want to say, 12 teams is a good idea. That's stupid. It should be at 4. If you can't confidently say there's 4, without a doubt, 4 best teams in the country right now, how are you going to get 12? That's besides the point. But when you look at Alabama 6, they should be 6. Ohio State should be 5. USC should be 4. TCU should be 3. Michigan should be 2. And obviously Georgia, the reigning defending champs who are undefeated, obviously should be number 1. I was kind of nervous that Ohio State was going to be 6. Like I said, I don't like Ohio State, but I want them to be number 5. I want them in the playoffs because I want to see good football. If TCU is in the playoffs, I don't care who they play, whether it's USC, Michigan, or Georgia. That's not going to be a good game. I want to see good games. Ohio State against USC, Ohio State against Michigan, or Ohio State against Georgia would 100% be a better game to watch and a more competitive game than TCU against any 3 of those teams. But to me, out of the 1 through 6, I think the committee finally got it right.
And I really agree with what you're saying about TCU. And TCU kind of reminds me of Florida State in the first year of the college football playoffs, 2014 to 2015. They were undefeated, and this is their second straight year, so obviously you have to put them in. But people watching, they're like, they're not really all that great. And when it came for them to play Oregon in the Rose Bowl, Oregon pretty much dominated that whole game to move on to the national championship. So it's going to be interesting to see because, like you said, if TCU's undefeated, then you have to put them in no matter what. But, yeah, I agree. If they lose, they're out. I think they have not been very convincing. The committee certainly sees that. And I think the committee honestly may be wanting them to lose so they don't have to put them in. They don't have to play because I think they agree with you. Like, no matter if TCU does indeed make the playoffs, like, they're going to lose, whether it's Michigan, Georgia. If Ohio State somehow gets in with TCU, they're not going to win. And like credit to TCU, obviously winning is very hard, and to go undefeated is extremely challenging. But when it's time for them to step up and play these big teams, I just don't think they'll have the talent. I think they'll be getting out coached, and we just won't be seeing these great fun games that we have seen in the past.
And when you look at the college football playoffs, if Alabama was number 5, this was a situation. If Alabama was 5 in the rankings today, and if USC lost, we could have had a 2-loss team and TCU in the playoffs. The worst team ever to be in the playoffs and the first ever 2-loss team in the playoffs. Like, to me, that's just so frustrating. And it's so wild to think we're talking about TCU. If they are undefeated, they do 100% to be in the playoffs. But we're talking about TCU, a Power 5 team, a Power 5 program. If they win their conference championship game, that means they would get a win against the number 10 team in the country in Kansas State. We're talking about if they deserve to be in the playoff, being undefeated. Last year, Cincinnati, a group of 5 team was undefeated, and they were in the playoffs. It's so crazy. We're talking about a group of 5 was in the playoffs last year, undefeated. We're talking about a Power 5, Big 12 team, undefeated. They don't deserve in. Like, that's crazy. I think TCU is not good. I think they're overrated. If they win this Saturday, 100% they deserve to be in. But it's so just crazy what a year can make when you look at these 2 situations in the college football format.
Yeah, it's truly one of the crazier years. I think this is one of the craziest playoff selections we're going to see since when they first started the 2014-2015 season, where Ohio State went on that ridiculous run of Cardale Jones. Obviously, there's a lot of controversy around that decision between Ohio State, Baylor, and I want to say it was also TCU. I forget who the third, but point is, obviously the committee did end up getting that right, and past few years it's kind of been an obvious selection. But like you said, now we're talking about potentially 2-loss teams getting to the playoff. People trying to argue that TCU in the Power 5 conference, like you said, shouldn't be in even if they do win out. That is ludicrous. That is crazy, because at the end of the day, if you keep winning, you deserve to be in those playoffs.
This is, to me, without a doubt, not even close, the worst college football, just overall, since the college football playoff format started in 2014 to 15, when you look at, group of 5 teams, UCF is ranked right now with 3 losses. That should not happen. I like group of 5 teams. I want group of 5 teams to get a fair opportunity. Being a Marshall fan, it does not happen often. Get a big opportunity to play a big time school. Upsets. They can happen, but they're not likely. A 3-loss team in the group of 5 should not be ranked. This is the one year to me, a group of 5 team does not even deserve to be in a New Year's Six Bowl. Like, a Tulane team has 2 losses, and we're talking about, Tulane's, they're so good. UCF has 3 losses. They lost to Navy a couple weeks ago, and they didn't drop in the rankings. Cincinnati had 2 losses a week or so ago, and they were in the top 25. And this, to me, I am biased on this because it's so freaking frustrating. And Marshall could have had 3 losses and won the Sun Belt. 3. There's not a doubt in my mind they would 100% when they got the New Year's Six Bowl with a win over Notre Dame. Like, it's crazy. This was a perfect year for them to possibly represent their conference in a New Year's Six Bowl, because there's just so many teams that you expect to do good, and I'm just kind of like, man, not as good as what they are in previous years. Like a Cincinnati with 3 losses. UCF's ranked, but 3 losses. Several years ago, they had like 1-2 losses in a span of 2 years. You got Alabama, who is so overrated. This is their worst team in over a decade. And, up until today, we thought there was still a chance they could possibly get in the playoffs. I mean, if TCU and USC lose, there's still a chance they can get in. But it's so crazy. Just these teams that you expect to do good are not really performing as a high of a level as you thought they would. And just, I don't know. I just feel like college football as a whole this season, it's not been as good as in years past.
It hasn't. And like you said, Alabama's having their worst year in the past decade. Is still one of the most overrated teams. And normally I try not to be this type of guy, but let's say this was Auburn, not Bama. I don't think the committee's even considering Auburn for the playoffs. Alabama has their name going for them, and admittedly, with their history, especially their recent history, that's the recognition they deserve. But this is a year-by-year selection. Past years shouldn't matter. It shouldn't matter that obviously Georgia winning championship going undefeated is a big part, but let's say Georgia lost 2 games. It shouldn't matter if they're champions last year. And I think there's just so much bias in the playoff committee, whether they do make the right decisions or not. And it's going to be crazy to see what happens this year, because there's so much inconsistency in college football. One of the craziest years, but one of the more, dare I say, craziest, but also unexciting, because crazy doesn't always turn out to just like we keep saying, inconsistent. And yeah, I just really don't know how to further explain that. You explained it so well. And with this playoff selection, obviously the conference championships are going to play a huge part. But yeah, we shouldn't, obviously the undefeated teams, TCU, Michigan, Georgia, they all deserve to be in. Like you said earlier, Michigan and Georgia, if they do lose, they're in. So it's going to be crazy what they see. I think if TCU or USC loses, I don't think there is a specific right answer to who gets that final spot.
Well, I feel like if TCU loses or USC loses, you lose, you're out. Ohio State has to get that spot. Like, if TCU loses the game, I don't care if it's by 1 point if I play the game. I don't think they deserve it, because even though Alabama is so overrated, this is the worst team in forever, Alabama would kill TCU, in my opinion. When you look at this, Ohio State's better than Alabama. I know they lost by over 20 to Michigan, but like I said earlier, this game was closer than the score indicates. Ohio State is much better than Alabama. I would put money on Ohio State to beat Alabama right now. Ohio State, I think, would definitely deserve the spot if USC or TCU lose. And, let's say, if TCU is undefeated, obviously they're in. But USC has 1 loss too. So I know you're a Ohio State fan, but, do you think USC should get the 4th spot with 1 loss? Or do you think it should be Ohio State?
If USC wins their conference championship game, as much as I hate to say it, they should be in. Because I think winning the conference championship should have high priority. Obviously, we know how talented Ohio State is. we know that they certainly have the talent to be in, but at the end of the day, if both teams have one losses, but one of those teams has a conference championship and the other team doesn't, you have to give it to them.
And this is something like it's weird because when you look at the group of 5, you have to win your conference just to be eligible to get the New Year's Six Bowl. In the college football playoff, that's not the case. Like, as much as I do think Ohio State should be in the playoffs if USC or TCU loses, we're talking about them and Alabama. Neither one of those teams are even going to be representing their conference in their own conference championship game. I don't know. I think it's just kind of weird. We talk about how group of 5 teams, you have to win your conference. But with the playoffs, it doesn't happen. I know there's situations like, yes, let's say Purdue beats Michigan. You're not going to have a Purdue 8-4 team in the playoff, but it's just interesting, kind of like the different scenarios and different stuff compared to the 2, Power 5 and the Group of 5. But with college football, I don't know. It's just like we're kind of talking about. It's not what it used to be at all, especially this season. But when you look at Ohio State, when you look at Michigan, I feel like that kind of kills Stroud's chance to win the Heisman. When you look at USC, Caleb Williams, to me, is not the clear favorite to win the Heisman, but I would say if I had to pick somebody, it probably would be him because he had a nice game this past week. And when you look at the Heisman people, Bryce Young's not playing a conference championship game, neither is CJ Stroud. It's really Caleb Williams's to lose. I don't think he's played phenomenal this year. He's played good, but it's one of the situations. It's his to lose because he's playing the conference championship game. If he has another good game, Bryce Young or CJ Stroud doesn't have that game to kind of help them elevate their case to win it. The last time we saw Stroud, he sucked against Michigan for the second straight year. Last time we saw Bryce Young was good, but he wasn't like he was last year. When you look at Williams, he has that game to kind of help him, even more. He's played a couple very good games, but when you look at the Heisman, that's something even else to me. I would say even go back to as far as maybe Lamar Jackson. Since then, there's not been a clear favorite Heisman winner that has made college football so much to watch. Now we're giving the Heisman winners to guys who just are not nearly as talented as some of these players 6-7 years ago.
Yeah, no, something that really streaks out to me, let's say Young had his best season ever. Like that Heisman, they don't want to give it to a player a second time. That's already a roadblock to Young's. Obviously, Archie Griffin being the only time to Heisman winner, and he already has that going against him. And he said Stroud kind of lost all his momentum with that loss to Michigan, and the fact it's 2 straight years where he's really struggled. Even though he's had a really great game, people look at the big games and how you step up. So I think Williams is the favorite, and I think as of now that's more well-deserved for him, but I don't say that with confidence. This is kind of a year where the Heisman race just hasn't been all that exciting. It's not something in past years, last year, 2 years ago. I'm reading up on it. I'm just making my predictions. I'm really into it, and this year I'm just kind of, it's cool, I'll read up on it, but I'm not as passionate as I was these last few years just because it's just been so wildly inconsistent, and it seems like there's no certain one player like years past who stepped up and made himself a Heisman obvious, I guess you say, like Joe Burrow, where obviously we all know his final college season, but you saw him really step up. He was kind of the out-of-nowhere guy. We have not really seen that this year.
And when you look at the Heisman, Burrow was obvious, one of the best seasons ever. And you look at it back then, you would watch the Heisman and it's going to be so fun to watch. And I feel like Burrow's even kind of an outlier because when you look at before, some of those years before Burrow, they weren't really as exciting. When you look at this, Johnny Manziel, Winston, Jackson era. I mean, I wasn't really big on any of those guys, but they made college football fun to watch. And, that was kind of you kind of had a feeling it was going to be him, but it wasn't completely obvious. Even go back on some of these, young, smaller, quarterbacks, some of these, players who did not play high profile names. Look at Cato from Marshall, Jordan Lynch from Northern Illinois. Those guys who didn't get a ton of recognition, but you didn't know where they were maybe going to finish in the polls and stuff like that. I just feel like each year, aside from Burrow, I feel like the Heisman is getting less intriguing to watch. and the players who are winning it are getting less deserving, really, pretty much each year compared to these 7-8 years ago.
Yeah, and you also have to wonder on the business side how this is dealing with college football and the Heisman and ratings, because at the end of the day, everything's also a business. So when the quality becomes worse, that's also going to be worse on your business. So it's going to be interesting to see like how college football tries to market this, because I think a lot of people are agreeing with what we're saying. It's just not as fun anymore, and that just doesn't hurt the ceremony. It makes less people want to watch those players, and I think that's a big thing we've seen in the past. Like with Joe Burrow, obviously us Bengals fans, we knew at some point he was going to be our quarterback, so we wanted to tune in. But also, we were tuning into Tua, who obviously was a hot quarterback prospect. And like you said, even guys like Johnny Manziel, or even going back to RG3, where they may have not been the obvious guy, they made college football fun to watch. Now, obviously, I love CJ Stroud, and he's a phenomenal player, but I love him because he plays at Ohio State. But if I'm a TCU fan, I'm not taking time out of my schedule to specifically watch him or to specifically watch Bryce Young like so many people in the past have done.
And when you look at the Heisman, 14 and 15, I think. I might got those years mixed up. But Mariota and Winston both won the Heisman.
Yeah, 2014 to 2015.
Both those quarterbacks went 1 and 2. You knew they were going to be 1 and 2. You knew Winston was going to be the first pick. You knew Mariota was going to be second pick. Neither one of those players have lived up to the hype, in the NFL. But those players were just so fun to watch. And you talked about, the only player to win the Heisman twice, Archie Griffin. I think it's a matter of time until somebody wins the Heisman twice. As stupid as it is, it's all about ratings, and it's going to get people talking. If we see these players like Caleb Williams and Bryce Young, some of these other guys who aren't really deserving as the Heisman compared to some of these other players from years prior. This is a situation that we see a guy in his freshman or sophomore year win the Heisman when he shouldn't. By the time his maybe his senior year, nobody else is really up there, especially a guy like a guy, let's say, from Alabama. Obviously, college football loves SEC schools. As dumb as it would be, I think that college football will be willing to do it because they want people talking, like we're talking about. Like, it's not as fun as what it used to be. It's not as intriguing to watch. But if you get something that has somebody who gets a 2-time Heisman winner, it's going to get people talking who don't really follow college football much like they used to. And as it's going to get publicity, and there's no bad publicity in that way to me.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, everything's a business. For college football, it's all about viewership. Well, any sport, really. And obviously, the more viewerships, the more money they get. And I think, and obviously, not a lot of people's first instinct when watching sports is, oh, what's going on in business? But I think it's important to remember, at the end of the day, this is a business. They're trying to make money. So, yeah, politics are going to be involved. They're going to do what's best for themselves and not necessarily the sport.
We talked about business really kind of beginning when we talked about it's obvious the NFL wanted Watson to play against the Texans, and we're kind of closing it with business, with our college football. Kind of talking about the college football, reacting to the rankings today, talking about the Bengals win against Tennessee on Sunday, kind of previewing their game against the Chiefs this upcoming Sunday, talking about who should be the next head coach of the Cincinnati Bearcats and several other topics we talked about. So, Braedan, can you kind of tell some of the listeners who can follow you on social media?
Absolutely. So, on Instagram, you can follow me at Bengals_NFL. Post daily on game days. I'm posting my analysis, my thoughts. Then you can also follow me on Twitter, Bengals_action. And on there, I'm giving not quite in-depth analysis, but you get my kind of instant reaction. Sometimes it's more positive, sometimes it's more negative. I do my best to take the emotions out of it, which I think I do a pretty good job of doing, and kind of giving that quick analysis, what went right on a play, what went wrong on a play. So those are the two main places where you guys can find me.
Yeah, you can check out, Braedan on social media, like you mentioned. I'll put the links in the description below. If you're new to the channel or if you've seen my videos before, make sure to subscribe to my channel and like this video. I would really, really appreciate it. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you all next time on the Sports Behind Show.